Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Relationship School Smart Couple Podcast. What is up, crew? How we doing out there? How you living? All right, good to be back with another episode. If you're new, welcome. We talk all about love and long-term relationship here and becoming oneself through that path. And if you're returning, welcome back. Psyched to have your ear still here. As always, join the Smart Couple Facebook group if you want to have a dialogue about some of these episodes. Just type in your search bar, Monogamy Smart Couple, or just Smart Couple Facebook group in your Facebook search bar, and then ask to join. All right? Okay, in this episode, I've got a special guest I've been wanting to interview for years, Dr. Warren Farrell. He wrote The Myth of Male Power. He wrote Women Can't Hear What Men Don't Say, and his latest book, The Boy Crisis, he co-authored with John Gray. A little bit about Warren. He is really challenging a lot of assumptions out there, and I really encourage you to listen to this episode with an open mind and a heart, all right? So Dr. Warren Farrell has been chosen by the Financial Times as one of the world's top 100 thought leaders, and by the Center for World Spirituality in 2011 as one of the world's spiritual leaders. His books are published in over 50 countries and in 15 languages, 2 award-winning international bestsellers, Why Men Are the Way They Are and The Myth of Male Power. He's currently the chair of the commission to create a White House Council on Boys to Men. Okay, this guy is a champion to try to help us raise boys differently, bottom line. And he's been on Oprah, Larry King Live, and loads of newspaper articles, magazines, and media outlets. He lives in Mill Valley, California. He enjoys yoga, tennis, hiking, and hosting small dinner salons and parties at him and his wife's home. So, again, the guy is a force. He's got, it looks like, 2 daughters, and we didn't talk about that today, but he is a champion for men and women and humanity by saying, hey, I think what's going on here is we need to raise boys differently because they will turn into men who are different, who will take better care of the planet and each other. And I agree with that. I've been in this conversation myself, having a son and having done men's groups for years and boys groups and tons of men's work and written about this in grad school. So I'm just really, really grateful that Warren gave us his time. And I think you're going to appreciate his perspective here. And it's going to challenge some of you, I think. So let's listen in to Dr. Farrell. Let's go. All right. Welcome to the show, Warren Farrell.
I'm looking forward to being with you.
Yeah, I'm really psyched to have you here, man. I've been wanting to have this conversation for a long time, and I've been a fan of yours for several years now, having read the book, The Myth of Male Power, which I got right here. And I love the titles of your book are so good. The Women Can't Hear What Men Don't Say. I mean, it's just like, boom, that kind of says it all right there. Anyway, there's a number of reasons why I reached out to you, and we'll get into a few of those. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I have a boy, a son, and a girl, 9 and 7. And I really love and resonate with how you talk about children and why this matters so much right now, how we raise kids, particularly boys. So before we get into that, will you just give your version of the 2-minute bio of like who's Warren Farrell and why do you care about this type of stuff?
Yeah, I started my sort of career in gender, started out in 1969, basically, when the women's movement began to surface in the United States. And I began to talk to my classes at Rutgers University in New Jersey about it. And the students came back to me and said, when you talk about political science, which is your PhD area, you're excited and good. But when you talk about gender and women's movement, you have like fire in your belly and it really excites us. And so I changed my dissertation topic to that and then wrote my first book, The Liberated Man, on that issue, and started speaking all around and that got me involved with the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City, and spent 3 years with them, and that got me speaking all around the world on women's issues and the importance of women being able to be independent, and the importance of men being secure enough to support that, and how it benefited men as well. And so that launched my career, if you will, and did a huge amount of media, New York Times, and all the Today shows and Tomorrow shows, et cetera. And then in the mid 70s, I began to see divorces spike a great deal, and noticed that that some of the children were having some problems after divorce, and began to do the first bit of investigating the first bit of research on that, and seeing that the children that didn't have dads seemed to be doing a lot worse than the ones that did. And so I started to articulate this to the board of NOW, and NOW was saying, Warren, the women that we are dealing with who are NOW members, our membership wants equality on the one hand, but they also, if they're women and they're divorced, they want the women to be able to be have the decision as to whether they want to be the primary parent or they want to share the parenting with the man. And I said, that's like a medical doctor saying, I want to be able to make the decision as to whether or not the medical community should have women involved with it or not.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll decide when and where, and that's not equality, that's territoriality. And so we had a little bit of tension on that issue. But they also said, go out and do the research, though, on this and see whether, what your instinct is accurate or not. And so I did. And I was hoping as I did the research that I would find that, women who made the decision to raise the children alone would do just fine, because that decision was paying my bills. If I
that's right.
was becoming well known and doing very well financially based on the agreement with feminism. But I found the opposite. I found the more the research got sophisticated, the more I found that the correlation, what was at one point a correlation of dad involvement in children doing well, really became clear that it was more than just a correlation, it was cause. And then I started to investigate, well, what is it that dads do that lead to children being so much more effective in the world and happy and mentally balanced when they have dad involvement, and so I started investigating that, and I think that's some of the most fascinating parts of my research for the boy crisis, was that seeing the differences between what dads do as a parent and what moms do, and why moms and dads need to be communicating with each other about the value of what they do. Because it's that checks and balance parenting, the mom understanding the value of dad roughhousing, for example, or enforcing boundaries, and dad understanding the value of mom being more protective than he would be prone to be, more unconditionally nurturing than he would be prone to be. And so, and why both parents need to understand what's happening there. But the truth is, you just read the title of one of my books a minute ago called "Women Can't Hear What Men Don't Say," and men have not studied parenting books or magazines, and even if they did, what they do, things like why roughhousing, boundary enforcement, why tough love, why that's so important. Those in-depth insights as to that are not appearing in parenting magazines and in women's magazines, which are produce most 99% of what people read on parenting. And so I realized there was a real reason for me to explain why dads are so crucial, why they're more crucial to boys than to girls, and dads need to know what the connections are between things like roughhousing and empathy, which is totally counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But once it sounds like you've read The Boy Crisis, and once you read it, it's like it all makes sense. But but you don't. Nobody in the culture is taught to think about those things.
Yeah, it's incredible, the arc of your journey here, and now the mission you're on to help. I mean, I guess balance the scales here, because it sounds like still it's clear that women are raising boys
Mhm.
And are you like, can we get into a little bit of, I listened to this amazing interview you did with Jordan Peterson also recently. And so I want to come back to that empathy versus roughhousing thing
Yes.
in a minute. But why is this happening? Like, why is it that dads, in a way, I'm kind of hearing, are undervalued of the impact that they have on child development?
Yes, when the problem, the boy crisis sort of exists in all 63 of the largest developed nations. And in all, but those developed nations have in common is not having to be so constrained by survival's needs. And so they've had more permission for divorce, and they've also had more permission for women to have children without being married. And so in the United States, 53% of women who are under 30 who have children without being married. And so I'm more politically liberal. So for me, being married or not being married seems like a fair choice.
Yeah.
But what I discovered was that was not that there's something much more to it than that. That conservatives are much more in tune with the liberals, and that is that when a couple is not married, the father is far more likely to drift out of the relationship within 3 to 4 years, even when that couple is living together when the child is born.
Hmm.
So you have among unmarried mothers, of course, you have many unmarried mothers whose children don't even know who the father is, and then it's all sorts of gradations. But even among the closely knit ones living together in a long-term relationship, the father often feels that what he has to contribute isn't valued, and he sort of often disconnects from the relationship. And the outcome is that the children don't do nearly as well. Girls are far more likely when without father involvement to be pregnant as teenagers without being married, and the boys are likely to do worse in more than 70 different areas. They're likely to do worse on every single academic subject, but especially on reading and writing, which are the biggest predictors of success or failure. They're likely to be much more a failure to launch. They're likely to drop out of high school to a much greater degree. With that dropping out of high school, they're much more likely to commit crimes. They're much more likely to be unemployed. They're more likely to be depressed, to be alienated, to be withdrawn, to have very few social connections that are useful. All of these, I mean, it is like you think of being a parent and having nightmares, and any nightmare you can think of, you're more likely to have with a minimal amount of father involvement, or what I call being a dad deprived boy. So the problems are there for girls and for boys. Most of the problems exist for girls in all these 70 different areas, but they don't exist for girls in nearly the degree. So I'll be really scientific for a moment, because
Sure.
you seem to appeal to a sophisticated audience. Scientists have found that when boys and girls are 9 years of age, the length of their telomeres, that is the length of their inside of every cell, there are telomeres, and the longer your telomeres are, the more they are able to hold all the genes that prevent you from having diseases. And so if your telomeres are 14% shorter at the age of 9, you're likely to have about a 14% shorter life expectancy, and
Wow.
that turns out to be they looked at the telomere length of boys and girls at the age of 9, and what the factors were that led to shorter versus longer telomeres, and they found that the most important single factor was father involvement or lack of father involvement. So the average length of the telomere being shorter for boys and girls without father involvement was 14%. But the difference between boys and girls, brothers and sisters, was that the boys' telomeres were yet again 40% shorter than their sisters.
Wow.
We will eventually discover the reasons why. I think I know a lot of the reasons why, but if you just want to go bottom line and sort of, father involved versus dad deprived, you have this enormous difference in
Yeah.
in life expectancy that you're giving your son or daughter at the age of 9. Nobody knows these things. And so the Boy Crisis book is filled with things like that, that when you read them, you realize, my God, there's two responsibilities here as a parent. One is dad, for you to be involved. Dad, for you to understand that once you're earning the family income is 50,000 to 70,000, depending on where you live, maybe in Boulder and Mill Valley, maybe 80, 90,000.
Yeah.
In most places in the country, once you have that amount of income for the family of 4, the rest of it is dad's time being more important than dad's dime or parents' time. And so, and that's, that just the degree to which that was accurate, or the number one cause of the boy crisis, if you will, what astounded me. But the most fascinating thing was what dads do that is different from what moms do, and what the positive outcome is from what dads do.
Yeah. I want to get into what exactly they do here in a second. Let me just fast forward into the future when these boys become adult men. You mentioned a few things like more crime and they don't live as long. Mm-hmm. Given the Me Too movement and just the outright just hostility and aggression and just hatred and anger towards men, some men, the patriarchy, male power, it seems like that. It doesn't like if I'm a dadless boy, I'm a dad-deprived boy, that I'm going to turn into an adult man that doesn't even have social graces and doesn't know how to do consent and doesn't have boundaries. And so I turn into the very thing we're upset about in the culture around men, right?
Yes, exactly.
And yet, if we shame and blame men, right, we're sort of missing the point, it seems like. So can you speak to the Me Too movement in terms of, yes, it's awesome, and I think no one's probably talking about how we raise boys being the issue.
Yes.
And I'm guessing you would.
Yes, definitely. So the first part of what you mentioned is really pivotal, which is the number one shouting phenomenon of the hashtag Me Too movement should be, we need to have boys have dads, because boys with dads are far more nuanced in the way they deal with girls and women. They're far more secure. They're much less likely to drift into porn, and therefore have a whole series of problems that come from porn addiction. They're much more likely to be productive in the world. They're much more likely to be the men we want to love and marry. And so, one of the reasons we're having this extreme dysfunction among boys that is way beyond the dysfunction of the Weinsteins and the people, the men that have been accused of hashtag Me Too, is get dads more involved in the family, and mothers understand what dads contribute and work with them to make those contributions. Value dads, because when you value any man, he will die for you. Yeah. Meaning that, every generation had its war. And what we did is we said, we need you to be willing to die, to be able to defend the country, to be able to defend the land and the property your wife and children live on. And men were willing to do that. And if we say to men, we need you to be father warriors, to get involved in the process, and men feel that that their value is understood, men will serve, because that's what men have learned to do historically, is to come to the call, respond to the call. So that's part one. Yeah. Part two is that hashtag Me Too is very important, that women speak up and say what they feel. Right or wrong, we need to hear their perspectives. But it's more complex than that. So far, we've had a hashtag Me Too monologue. What we need is a hashtag Me Too dialogue. And the hashtag Me Too monologue has been largely by women of a feminist perspective or a politically liberal perspective, who call themselves progressives, but progressive is a self-righteous term that should never be used by anybody about themselves. So we have to make sure that when we talk about gender, we're not just talking about women's perspectives, and not just women's perspectives, but feminist women's perspectives. We need feminist women's perspectives. We need feminist men's perspectives. Oh, sorry, a conservative women's perspective. We need feminist type or liberal men's perspectives, and we need conservative men's perspectives. And so what we've done in the last 50 years is we've taken, the feminist movement has led us taking a magnifying glass to to women's experience of powerlessness and women's experience of male power, as opposed to also taking a magnifying glass to men's experience of powerlessness and men's experience of women's power. The enormous power that men feel women have over them by their attractiveness and beauty, particularly when they're young and attractive, and understanding the biology of this and what's both, and the mixed messages that men are hearing now. Men have to speak up about their mixed messages. We have in California and in many states, 26 other states in the United States, this is in progress, an affirmative consent law, which means if your son is in college and he asks out a woman and she says yes on a date, and then he reaches on that date over to hold her hand, and she can later come back, or even then, accuse him of sexual harassment, and she will be legally able to do that. And even if she's cooperative, but at some point during the course of developed intimacy, she feels a little bit pushed, and then later, and she doesn't mind it at the time, but later they break up and maybe he had an affair with somebody else and she's really angry at him, she can come back and say any one of those intimacy efforts that he took, she can say was not really, he didn't ask her whether or not he could kiss her on the cheek or kiss her or whatever, and therefore he should be accused of sexual harassment, and she would legally have a standing.
Yeah.
And so this is scaring the dickens out of boys, because we haven't simultaneously said to men and women, okay, if you want this to be this way, which is arguably positive, then let's train our daughters to risk sexual rejection as often as our sons risk sexual rejection, not by option, by if your son is really tall and good looking and a sports person, the chances are you've gotten a lot of aggressive calls from girls to him. But the more attractive the girl is, the less likely she is to make those assertive, aggressive calls. And the more likely your son is to be addicted to her, and the more likely the culture is saying that these girls that you're really attracted to, you're expected to ask her out, you're expected to pick her up, and you're still expected to pay for dinner, even though, and ask any restaurant who pays for dinner the most frequently. And except for among certain groups of college women and men, the boys and men and young boys are still paying for the meals and taking the risks of rejection and being the first one to do the tongue kissing and the first one to touch in genitals. And so the boys are risking rejection. So the boys are more than the girls are. And so we aren't asking girls to share responsibility equally for that. And so how does your son feel about that? When does he feel like he's so fearful that he's just going to be very cautious and wait for the girl or woman to initiate? Right. And what happens, he will tell you, if you ask him and don't threaten him with being chastised for the wrong answer, you'll find that he'll say, my experience has been that when I reach out very cautiously or don't reach out at all and wait for the girl to take the initiative, the response that I get is, Jimmy, or, John, you are really a sweet guy. I really like you. I wish more guys were like you, but I think we should just be friends. And so, and when he looks at the culture of this and he sees, the best-selling novel in paperback form in recent history to women was 50 Shades of Grey. And the best-selling film of all time to women is the female fantasy of Gone with the Wind, and in the female fantasy of Gone with the Wind, the Rhett Butler character drags the woman up the stairs against the protest. And the next scene you see her happy and loving for the first time. And so, what is it I'm supposed to do when women say yes? I'm supposed to carry them up the stairs and make them really happy, or I'm supposed to be the quasi-sadistic character in the sadomasochistic version of 50 Shades of Grey? Or am I supposed to be warm, gentle, soft touching and make sure I give the woman a piece of paper to sign before I say,
Yeah.
she says yes?
Yeah, I mean, I start to feel squashed into a very narrow way of that I can behave, which we get back to what William Pollock calls the boy code, where now I'm in a gender straitjacket and I can't be myself. Like I've got to act a certain way, and I can't do most things, but be macho, be this way. But now I'm also, I mean, I think the new messages seems like are be soft, be kind, be caring, don't be big and strong because that's actually threatening, but it seems like we want that also. So if I'm a man, out in the culture, I'm very confused.
If you're a boy
Yeah,
who's
right.
14, 15 years of age, and you are on average significantly less mature than the girl that you're interested in, and you are, and yet you're the one that's expected to risk the rejection predominantly, and she is not, to a much greater degree.
Yeah.
This is really, you are confused. You're feeling all these hormones beginning to act up, and you're wanting to be physical with her, and you see her for even the first time, and if you had your way, you would be physical with about half the girls in your class at the age of 15, 16. But you restrain yourself 99.9% of the time. But the one time you express yourself the way you really feel is the time that you either get in trouble, or if you continue repressing yourself, you get in trouble in a different way by the girl not being interested. And so this doesn't mean that for every single thing I say that a woman doesn't have a good answer. But what has to happen is a dialogue so that women hear what men are going through and men hear that what women are going through. And so the solution to this process is communication, not one side speaking up. We always had a battle of the sexes, but in the past, we've had a battle of the sexes, where both sexes did battle. They spoke up and mocked each other, or were facetious or sarcastic or whatever, or did their jokes with each other. But now we don't have a battle of the sexes. We have a war in which only one side has shown up. And guys have put their heads in the sand, hoping the bullets will miss. And that's not. So we criticize men for toxic masculinity because they don't speak up and share with their feelings. And then we tell them, by the way, you better not speak up and share your feelings because that's just mansplaining. And besides, you're a male and you're a white male and you've had all the power. So this is time for women to speak up and you to shut up. And so we're telling men, open up and express your feelings rather than have toxic masculinity. And then when they express their feelings, we're criticizing them and putting them down for expressing their feelings. This is not socially, culturally a healthy atmosphere for our sons. And, women have as many sons as they have daughters. And the women who have the sons and daughters care about as much about their sons as they do their daughters. And so a lot of mothers of sons, are writing me and saying, my God, this is so helpful for me to sort of put words to what on some level I see my son squirmingly articulating, but not being able to articulate.
Yeah. All right, quick interruption here from the relationship school. So we are now enrolling in the deep psychology of intimate relationships. That 9-month class you never got in high school or college is open. Okay, we start in late January. We would like to hear from you, so you can apply. But first, check out what happened with Darlene.
Before I did this, I didn't feel seen, heard, understood, met. I didn't feel loved in my intimate relationship. I mean, my partner and I, for decades, we were going around in circles with the blame game and the power struggle. And I thought, oh, there's got to be a better way. Now, after 9 months of inspiration, dedication, transformation, I feel free. I feel like I can be me. I feel ready to love completely. I'm so grateful for the relationship school. I know anyone who tries it would be too.
Wow, how about that from Darlene? She had an amazing experience. She worked hard. She did the work. She had fun. She laughed. She cried. So thanks, Darlene. So check us out at relationshipschool.net/DPIR if you want to apply and see if it's a good fit. Okay, back to Dr. Warren Farrell. You said a minute ago, men kind of just put their heads in the sand. Is that what you find is happening? Like when you're just out there in the world, and the research you've done is that men are sort of, because I see a small, because I'm involved in men's work and relationship work. So I see a few leaders out there, putting their stake in the ground and saying, guys, like, come on, we need to take action here and speak up and help each other out and listen to women, but not collapse and, have a dialogue and all that. And yet there's maybe the mass culture or something. It's probably hard to really know, but what are you seeing out there that men, when you say they're putting their head in their sand, like what are you actually seeing is going on out there?
Yeah, boys, especially boys that go to college, and especially boys that go to college in the social sciences, are basically learning to shut up and to just listen and or to be the biggest jock in the sensitivity group, if you will. The men competing with each other to be the most empathetic, the most or strong in their defense of women. So going back to old heroic masculinity, but not articulating who they are, what they're feeling, what the mixed messages are they're experiencing. That if they were in any way, shape, or form in a social science setting, especially social work, psychology, anthropology, and so on, in those social sciences, boys are basically learning to shut their mouths and not do anything with that. And the big challenge for that is that they're not preparing themselves for what they need to be doing. If we want to move the culture forward in a positive way, which everybody does, we really need to be, first of all, teaching communication to boys and girls and trans people from the age of first, second, and third grade on. So that everybody learns to pay attention to everyone's story, to see them not as somebody I can bully or somebody I can outpace or do better than, but as somebody who has who's grown up with feelings and hurts and pains. And as you're listening to them in the classroom, as they do in Denmark, by the way, very successfully, that they train kids to listen to each other. That's only part of what communication is about. Real communication has to also incorporate understanding how to respond to somebody that you care about, who criticizes you, and not being defensive about that. Right. And I've teach communication courses all over the country because I see that it's that inability to handle personal communication. The inability to handle criticism without becoming defensive from a loved one, especially when it's given badly. And almost all of us think that any criticism given from a loved one is given badly. Right. And so that is the single biggest Achilles heel of all human beings, male and female and trans. There's no one that does a good job biologically on that. And in my couples workshops, I explain why that's the case biologically, but it really doesn't make that much difference. What makes a difference is learning how to do a workaround to that biological defensiveness. So the people you love, the people you care about, are never fearful of saying whatever is on their mind, no matter how wrong-headed you feel that it is. But once we do that in first, second, and third grade with the kids, we have to simultaneously be doing that with their parents. Otherwise, the kids will come home. The kids will come home and see their parents communicating defensively and lose respect for their parents, and that will break apart the family. And in a different type of way. So these are the things that every liberal and conservative should be able to get on board with, and because this is what will make the world a better place. I mean, in the greatest of fantasies, we'd have Republicans and Democrats listening to each other.
Absolutely. So as we wind down, I want to try to cover a couple more quick points. This rough play that you talked about in the Jordan Peterson interview, I'd loved. Will you say something about that empathy, rough play? Like, how does it that rough play can actually help with empathy?
Yes, so important. And this is just like one of a dozen differences between male, female, dad and mom style parenting. So typically speaking, dads are much more likely to roughhouse than moms are. And typically, yes, right.
True.
And
True with me. Me and my kids on the bed just wrestling, and I'm throwing them
absolutely.
around.
And
Yeah.
the kids, so what very few dads explain to mom is that the first, first of all, mom is usually looking at this roughhousing and she's going,
Right. She's a little
I feel like
anxious.
I have just
Yeah.
one more child to monitor here, instead of, and she's trying to keep this to herself because she sees the kids are having fun, but she knows in the back of her mind, or she feels in the back of her mind, that there's about a 90% chance or 100% chance that this is eventually going to end up in somebody getting
Tears.
tears. Yes, exactly. And then is she likely to be right? Only about 100% likely to be right. And so, and then then she's feeling guilty that she didn't interfere sooner, and prevent that from happening. But then she's aghast that the dad, after this crying or hurting each other has happened, goes back and rough plays again. And I am convinced I have only one, I have just one more child to monitor. And so what dads are doing that they don't explain to mom, and they don't know that is a number of things. One is they are creating a bond with the child. They're creating postponed gratification. They're creating boundary enforcement. They're usually creating an understanding of the distinction between being assertive versus aggressive, and they're creating greater empathy. So let me deconstruct this to explain how each of these come out of the roughhousing. So a good dad who roughhouses is creating a bond with his kids. The kids are like being on a roller coaster. They know they're sort of safe mostly, but they are so. But they're having filled with excitement. And most dads unconsciously use this bond to then go ahead and say, okay, we're finished with the roughhousing now. Get ready for bed. And when you get ready for bed, we'll do something else you like, either roughhousing or reading to you or whatever else you want. But bedtime is 9 o'clock. And whenever you're finished before 9, you have that time between when you're finished and bedtime for ourselves again. And the kids they're revved up and they're bonded with dad. They go ahead and they focus on their homework or doing whatever they need to do to get ready to have everybody ready so that they can recontinue with their dad. And so what the father, and usually the father will, if the children don't get that done, we'll just say, sorry, no more roughhousing. So let's take it back to the roughhousing itself. Let's say the father there's 3 children, and the father throws all 3 kids on the couch, and one is like 7 and 5 and 4, and so the 7-year-old pushes the 5 aside, the 5-year-old pushes his sister aside, and sooner or later somebody gets hurt, and dad says, okay, we got to stop the roughhousing now. Here's what can happen. You can fake me out. You can, do this type of thing to win in this wrestling match, because the game here is that the 3 kids will jump on top of the dad, turn him over, and pin him down before he pins the 3 of them down together.
Yeah.
And so, and each one of the children wants to be the kingpin of the pinning down. And so the father then, but in the process, they're experiencing what psychologists call emotional intelligence under fire. They're so excited under fire to be the person who is the kingpin of the winning of the wrestling match, that they don't think of anybody else's needs except themselves. But when dad now has the children in the palm of his hand, because there's such a bond there that's being created, and says, if you do this again, if you don't think of your sister again, or you don't think of the things that led to you hurting each other and your sister or brother crying, I'll have to stop the roughhousing. So he goes back and gives them another chance.
Yeah.
Now that he's given them a warning from their real life experience, not just in theory, because dad feels that a theoretical discussion of think of somebody besides yourself just goes in one ear and out the other for the child.
Oh, yeah.
It is only when the roughhousing stops and you have a chance to try again and to see if you can survive doing it the right way again. But usually the first or second time that the children do that, they don't do it well. And dad has to stop the roughhousing and said, okay.
Yeah, he has to intervene.
I told you that we'd stop the roughhousing. And then if the dad stops the roughhousing, which he usually does, but not always, but if he's a good dad, effective dad, he'll stop the roughhousing and say, okay, no more roughhousing till tomorrow night. And so then the children are now getting, okay, I was just lost my roughhousing. because I pushed my sister aside with
A little too
an
hard.
elbow.
Right.
I'm now seeing what is being not allowed. And so the child is learning the difference between being assertive versus aggressive.
Yeah, which is such a huge life distinction. That is
Huge life
major.
distinction. And because without that life distinction, nobody else likes you.
Yeah.
And you therefore have friends, and you feel like you're not capable of dealing with friends effectively. But something else also happened there, which is the dad forced the children, to do something that they didn't want to do, which is to be assertive rather than aggressive in order to get what they really wanted,
Yeah.
more roughhousing and playtime and bonding time with dad.
Yeah.
The child is learning the beginning of the boundary enforcement is teaching the child to have postponed gratification. And as we know, as we've known since the Michelle Marshmallow experience at Stanford years ago,
Yeah.
that postponed gratification is the single biggest predictor of success or lack of success. And so the boy and girl without postponed gratification goes to school, tries to finish homework, but is distracted by the immediacy of a desire to sort of see what's on the text that just came in, or accepts the invitation to play the video game and doesn't pay attention to the homework, or doesn't, learns that he's a tall boy and he could be on the basketball team, but is unwilling to come out and do the drills over and over and over again to do what is necessary to be on the basketball team or the gymnastic team. And so then the boy feels badly about himself because he's not on a team, he's not doing well in homework wise. And girls are when it comes to boy-girl time, girls aren't very interested in him because he's a loser. Girls don't go out with losers; they go out with winners. So he feels badly about himself. His parents aren't speaking about him with pride in their voice.
He stays home more often. He's on his phone more often.
Exactly, and he starts drifting away into, all right, I'll play video games and I'll identify with some hero, and I'm doing well with this video game, so I'll learn this a bit better. And so he has only video game friends, and before he knows that he's addicted to video games because that's the one area where he can succeed. And then when it comes to boy-girl time and the girls are going out with just the winners, he withdraws and it gets into porn. The porn addicts him to higher and higher levels of excitement. That's the only way his dopamine gets generated.
Mm-hmm.
And the result is when he gets together with a real female, she feels treated like some object in a porn movie. She withdraws from him, which only convinces him he is a loser with girls, which only sends him back to the porn. And you have a whole cycle continuing. Worst case scenarios, he gets depressed. He becomes suicidal. Worst case scenarios, he is so resentful at the parents, the schoolmates who never gave him the time of day, who had no respect for him, who didn't appreciate the subtlety of his sensitivity, and his teachers the same way, that he might go and shoot up a school, or do a mass shooting. And so what I saw in the research for the boy crisis is that almost every mass shooting, not every, but almost every mass shooting is by a boy who has minimal father involvement or no father involvement, a dad-deprived boy. And
not surprising, right?
And it's not surprising once you see it and you understand the importance of dads, but it was shocking to me the degree to which that was true.
Mm-hmm.
It was also shocking to me that almost all the ISIS recruits are dad-deprived children, not just the boys, but the smaller percentage of girls who are ISIS recruits are also dad-deprived girls to the great, more than any other single variable.
Wow. I mean, you're laying it out, so it's hard to really argue. I'm sure there's people that do, but it seems so evident that we have a very global crisis problem here.
Yeah.
And how, Warren, as we wind down, how serious are people taking your message? Because to me, it feels like, let's address how we raise boys. I've thought that for years, ever since I wrote my master's paper on the disconnected male back in 2005, on like men that are disconnected, like basically hurt other people. And then I took it a layer deeper finally and started studying the boy crisis, or what I thought was a boy crisis.
Yeah.
And it's still amazing to me that people aren't seeing this. So I'm just curious, how is it being received? Are people getting it? Or are people just like, don't talk to me about that?
Two huge groups of people and differences. The people who read the boy crisis, almost 100%, that read it from beginning to end and go just absolutely blown away by it, and wish they'd read it before or whatever. However, in terms of publicizing it, it's been the conservative media that has been very responsive to it, saying oftentimes, we've been saying this for years, that you have to have the intact family and you have to have fathers, and fathers are useful and the family is useful. But among the mainstream media, almost all of which is oriented toward the liberal orientation, and they are more saying, well, I see the value of this, but of fathers. And when fathers want to be involved and mothers want the fathers to be involved, this is good. But I don't want women to lose the option of being able to raise children by themselves. And I don't want women after divorce to lose the option to be the one to decide whether the children are taken care of by them, the mothers, or equally with the fathers. And so the liberal media has been very schizoid about this. I usually, like with Atlantic and Newsweek and CBS News Sunday Morning, they were all right on board, thinking this was a brilliant book, and they wanted to bring the boy crisis to the attention. And someone somewhere along the line said, no, this will deprive women of this freedom to raise children. And the fear of angering feminists led to the Newsweek and Atlantic and CBS News just dropping what they had planned, what they thought was going to be a wonderful segment. I've had the same type of problem with the Washington Post, and so so that's the challenge that we're dealing with here. But and then politicians are we're going to send. I chair a commission to create a White House Council on Boys and Men, and we're going to send members from that commission out to talk to Democratic and Republican presidential candidates in Iowa and New Hampshire if we can raise enough money to do that. And we're going to have the young men as well as people who are slightly older, like myself, talk to these politicians and say, hey, listen, if you're a Democrat and you're saying boys are having problems, and you're talking to a Republican family whose boys are having problems, but you are articulating the fact that you care about boys' problems, those Republican parents are going to care more about their son than they are about having to vote Republican. So this is something that you can take a lead with. And Republicans already know this, but they haven't articulated this in we have to pay attention to the boy crisis type of way.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's good to get the update. I appreciate it. And I'm so grateful for you fighting the cause here to help us raise boys with dads.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to see that you had the foresight and the wisdom to be involved in caring and focused on this in your master's degree work and reading about the boy crisis, years ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I have one more question for you. Two, actually. The final question being, where do people find the book and you? The second to last question, though, is something I ask all the guests, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but I started this relationship school because I'm on a mission to help 1 million teens and young adults get relationship education. It's something that was never given to me in high school or college, so that we know how to work out our differences, so that we can be emotionally and relationally literate, as well as 10 million families. So we have a really big mission. And let's imagine me, like the other day I was speaking in front of 200 high school kids, but if I had a room full of 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 young people, what would you whisper into my ear to tell them?
That the most important thing you can learn in school, the most important thing you can learn in school is communication. Communication, or the lack of communication. Marriages don't break up because of disagreements about money, sex, or child raising. They break up because of not knowing how to communicate about our disagreements about money, sex, and child raising. People are bullied because they can't see the person they're bullying. People are bullies because they carry around their body in a low self-esteem way that makes them vulnerable to the bullies. And so everybody needs to know this. Nobody, and so these are the fundamentals that have to happen. Every couple should be involved in relationship counseling, but particularly the part of relationship counseling that is focused on being able to handle personal criticism without becoming defensive. Every couple needs to know the difference between having a conflict-free zone. In my couples communication groups, I have the week divided into two parts: 166 hours for a conflict-free zone, 2 hours for a caring and sharing session in which only one concern is shared with your partner. But before that concern is shared with your partner moves into an altered state where she or he is able to hear criticism that they normally would lead to triggering defensiveness. Mm. And so this skill set to overcome our biological propensity to become defensive, there's nothing more fundamental than that. It affects everything you do. It affects your self-concept, your ability to have friends around you, therefore good social networks, therefore good mental health. Who you choose as a partner. Who you choose as a partner has a huge impact as to what your career is like or not like. And so it really comes out of that issue more than any other. You're far more likely to take reading and writing and have postponed gratification and advanced skills if you are able to feel like you are communicating effectively and you have that postponed gratification. So those are so that would be a long whisper in your ear.
I got it. Communication, guys.
Yes,
but I love how you unpacked that and really talked about the specifics of communication and our sensitivity and proclivity to defend ourselves and to be like afraid of criticism and shutting down and all that. So well said, and I'll take that.
One distinction there that I would make it easier for people to absorb. Yeah. Historically speaking, we train boys to be men by giving them heroic intelligence, which is intelligence to teach them how to be disposable in war. Heroic intelligence is intelligence for a short life. Health intelligence is intelligence for a long life. So we have to make a transition between teaching our children, but especially our boys, the difference between heroic intelligence and health intelligence, which is why about a fifth of the book, The Boy Crisis, is focused on exactly how to make that transition happen.
Beautiful. Okay, great. Thank you. And within health, of course, is relationships and communication and self-awareness.
And emotional intelligence.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Warren, where can people find you in the book?
The best place to find the book is on Amazon. Probably, if money is an issue, it's on sale for 1/3 off on Amazon. If you want to support local bookstores, just ask them to order The Boy Crisis. And so me, you can find on the website warrenfarrell.com. That's not Will Ferrell, the comedian, but Warren, W-A-R-R-E-N, Farrell, F is in Frank, A-R-R-E-L-L.com. And my email is there. I answer all my emails, even though that takes quite a bit of time. But I love hearing what your thoughts are about The Boy Crisis, how it worked for you, and anything that you fell short of being helpful for you.
Okay. Wow. Wonderful. Thanks for being such a, just beautiful soul to help us move this conversation forward, Warren.
Thank you. And thank you for the same. Thank you for the way you ask thoughtful, informed questions and how soulfully that you listen.
Yeah, you got it. Yo, guys, Warren Farrell. How about that? Lots packed in there, and we were just getting warmed up. I feel like I wanted to talk a lot more about the alarming statistics of fatherless boys. And for me, I'm very clear that's not blaming moms at all. It's just saying, guys, we need to, one view is let's keep marriages intact. That's one view. Another view is let's treat boys in such a way that when they grow up, they're men who look after their kids, period. and that their ex-wives or whoever are psyched for them to spend time with the kids. This is a complex problem, and I think at the root of it for me is how we raise boys, which is why years ago I did a boys group for my son, why I started a business called Boy Strong and raising boys. I dipped my toe in that water for a while, and why I wrote my master's paper on this subject. And there'll be more podcasts coming from me specifically on this issue, male conditioning, really. It's really intense. So action step, based on this, I just want, next time you find yourself judging any man, doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man or straight or gay or black or white, next time you find yourself judging a man, try to see him as a wounded little boy who didn't get taken very good care of. And he got trained into becoming who he is. He's not that way because that's his biology. He got trained to be this way. So consider that as an action step, right? Just try to see the hurt boy underneath the armor and the acting out. And then ask yourself, what am I going to do to change this conversation in my life? What am I going to do personally? You may not have a son, you may not be a parent, but you probably have friends who have sons. You probably are in contact with someone who is raising a boy somewhere, right? What are you going to do? How are you going to contribute here? Okay. Another action step here is to join our private Facebook group. Okay. Go to your Facebook search bar, Monogamy Smart Couple. Okay. That's where you can get great discussions on podcasts like this going. You can get advice. We have an amazing group of relationship coaches in there who are just volunteering their time to try to help you. And there's thousands of people in that group, and there's no shortage of quality coaching in there from our coaches. I can't speak to anyone else who's giving you advice in there, but I can speak to our coaches are going to challenge and support you in your relationship life. I know that. All right. And you can hire them also. They're here to serve. Okay. All right. Thanks. More guests like Warren Farrell? Yes or no? Leave us a comment in the Smart Couple Facebook group. And we'd love to hear your take, because this stuff matters. This is all part of relationship, you know? Okay. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Relationship School fans and Smart Couple listeners, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, all right? Do us a favor, subscribe, share one of these videos with a friend, all right? We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.